Hi, this is Tom Cotter. I'm one of the pastors here at First Baptist Church, and thank you for joining us for Session 3. I want to let you know that we've gotten a lot of questions from the first two sessions, and we're going to take a little bit of time now to explain some of those and to work on some of those. Pastor Steve, thank you for being here and for taking time to do this. Our first question is simply this. It's if you as pastor, you're the leader of the church, do your deacons have any input into the direction of the church?
Well, when it comes to the everyday scheduling and programming and administration, education, those sorts of things, no. But they don't want any input into those areas of the church. They've come to trust me, as I indicated earlier in the sessions. They trust the rest of the pastoral staff to manage the church and the everyday issues of the church. But when it comes to larger issues in the church, yes, they do have input. As I've indicated, our deacons are my best friends. They're my most trusted confidants. They are among the most spiritual men in the church. And as my friends, when we're facing a major issue in the church of one kind or another, I'll present it to them. I'll take it to the deacons, and I'll tell them what I believe the Lord is leading us to do in one issue or another. I invite their comments and counsel, and I listen to them. Very often they offer insight that did not occur to me. They're more prone to see issues from the congregation's perspective than I am. They always have great influence on my thinking. But the choice is always up to me to come to them seeking their counsel. Just like the choice is always up to me if I'm facing a decision in the home. The choice is always up to me to come to my wife and seek her counsel. You know what I've learned over the years? That God has given my wife great wisdom when it comes to domestic issues. So as the leader in my home, I don't take major directions or make major decisions in our home unless my wife and I are in agreement. And over the years, I've learned that God has given my deacons great wisdom when it comes to church issues. So I don't go in major directions or make major decisions in the church until I've come to these good friends of mine, these spiritual leaders in the church. I don't make major decisions until we're all in complete agreement.
So what do you do if a church has a problematic pastor? What do the deacons do about that?
Well, it's a good question. I know that sometimes pastors and deacons wind up on opposing sides of an issue, and that's always unfortunate because it almost always leads to problems in the church. Generally speaking, deacons should trust their pastor and his leadership. If he does something severe enough to lose their trust, then it's probably good for them to move him on out and to bring in a pastor that they can trust and then totally trust him. But the issue here, the priority here, is the need for deacons to trust the leadership of their pastors. I know from time to time a pastor will do something to break that trust. And when he does that, if he's a wise man, he'll move on out. But honestly, sometimes deacons stop trusting their pastor simply because he's trying to lead them in a direction they don't want to go. If deacons withdraw their trust, the burden of proof is on them. Remember, the pastor and the deacons form the New Testament ministry team, and it's very important for pastors and deacons both to work on maintaining this team spirit, this friendship among themselves, because God really is depending upon us to do great things for him.
One of the questions we have is, do you rotate your deacons? And if not, why not?
No, but I get that question a lot, and I know the thinking behind it. Many churches will rotate their deacons usually every 3 years and give them a year off. And the thinking there is to give them a respite, a year off. But as the ministry team here at First Baptist Pflugerville with the deacons, I know I don't get every fourth year off for rest. The rest of you staff pastors don't get every fourth year off to take a year of rest, and so neither do our deacons get every fourth year off to take a rest from their ministry responsibilities. And I'll tell you why. It's because we need all the deacons we can get, because we take our New Testament deacon ministry so seriously. The more deacons we have, the fewer families are assigned to each one of them, and it makes it easier for each individual deacon. But I'll tell you another reason. It's very important for deacons to form a ministry relationship with their families. And it's important for that relationship to be meaningful. It's important for that relationship to be consistent. And if a deacon takes off every fourth year, it interrupts those relationships and renders long-term deacon ministry ineffective. Besides, if we have a deacon who's effectively ministering to his families, if he's carrying food out to that family while the dad is out of work, or if that deacon has been influential in helping to lead the 12-year-old son to faith in Christ, if he's been out there with that family during a death in the family, if he's laughed with them and cried with them and shared with them and prayed with them, and they have this connection with their deacon, if I attempted after 3 years to take that deacon away from the family, I'm afraid they might set fire to my house. So no, we don't rotate our deacons.
You know, one comment that we got was that our adult Sunday school classes have care group leaders who are supposed to minister to class members. Now, how would this work in a deacon family ministry?
Yeah, you know, ideally they would work together. Ideally, the Sunday school class care group leader would work in tandem with the deacon assigned to that group. Overlapping ministries would have to be a good thing, not a bad thing. There wouldn't be a competition. They'd be supported. But in reality, in our church, most of our adult care group leaders are not functioning effectively, and ministry is not happening the way it should in all those cases. Some do, some don't. But if we totally relied upon our Sunday school care group leaders, I'm afraid that our congregation would not be receiving the ministry we want them to receive. Another thing, many of our active church members faithfully attend worship services, but do not attend Sunday school. Even if those people are on someone's Sunday school roll, they're not going to know the rest of the class members. They're not going to really know the teacher. They're not going to know in a meaningful way the care group leader. The care group leader is not going to know them very well either. So there'd be a breakdown in that scenario. There'd be a breakdown in ministering to those people. And then I think another important aspect to this is I don't really have any direct influence over Sunday school care group leaders. I can't hold them accountable for their work. If they're not doing their work, I really have no influence over that. I have more influence over my deacons. I meet with them all once a month. Our deacon chairman is holding them accountable for making their contacts. They're signing their commitments. They're living up to their commitments. So there's a lot more accountability to the deacon chairman and to the pastor from the deacons than there are from the Sunday school care group leaders.
Pastor, one comment we have says that in our church, we assign a number of widows to each deacon, but many of us can't keep up with their needs. So how do you take care of widows?
So in other words, the widows are divided up among all the deacons?
Correct.
We don't do that. We don't do that for an array of different reasons. Not all deacons are equal. Their ages are different. Their life situations are different. Their job situations are different. Their spiritual gifts are different. If we divided all of our widows up equally among our deacons, we would have some widows receiving excellent ministry from men whose life situation and age, perhaps, and career situation, spiritual gifts, lending themselves well. Those women would be getting excellent ministry. But widows assigned to men whose life situation did not lend itself well to ministering to them, or who don't have the spiritual gifts, those widows would not be well ministered to. So we don't divide our widows up equally among all the deacons. We recognize the diversity among our deacons. About 20% of our deacons are retired. I mean, they're still very active, but they have more control of their schedule. Their schedules are more flexible. So we divide our widows among these retired deacons. Older widows are assigned to older deacons. Younger widows are assigned to deacons who are more recently retired. These men are required to work very closely with their wives in this ministry area. And all deacons who minister to widows rely very heavily upon other men of our church through the Acts 6:1 ministry. I have a letter that was sent to our deacon chairman uninvited. I mean, this is just a spontaneous letter, and he's given this to me. I just want to read this to you. Dear deacon body, as a member of First Baptist Church, I want to thank you for all you do for our church family. When my husband was ill and passed away, our deacons were there for us. I am so very grateful. Recently, an older lady in my Sunday school class, she's a teacher, needed help moving to another apartment complex. One of our deacons organized a group of men, this is our Acts 6:1 ministry, who were there to move her furniture and belongings for her. She could not have afforded to pay someone, and she does not have family that could have helped. That was a wonderful gift to her and to us, her friends. Just a couple of weeks ago, I found myself needing some advice about home repair. My husband was a home builder, so I never had to worry about these things before he passed away. My deacon not only gave me the name of someone who could help me, but actually drove him over to my house to look at what I needed done and to schedule the work. The work was completed today, and I feel so blessed. The result is beautiful, and I got a quality job for a reasonable price. We widows sometimes feel when it comes to needs we have. I know of many other times when the deacons of our church have helped widows who needed advice or work done at home, or with a car, or in some other way. I can't imagine what it would be like not to have someone we could call when we have a need. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for your sacrificial service to our church family. We appreciate each and every one of you sincerely. And that comes from the teacher of one of our widows groups.
Well, that's good. And along that same vein, what about teenagers? How would you assign teenage church members who may attend without their parents?
As I've already said, we try to assign people based on existing connections, or in situations where connections can be built. Teenagers, tend a circle of trust, and it's always good if we can assign a deacon that's within that circle of trust, that already existing circle of trust. If we have a teenager who's coming without their parents, then that circle of trust is going to be pretty limited, and most often the deacon is not part of that circle of trust. I mean, there are exceptions. The deacon might be a coach at that teenager school, or might be a teacher at that teenager school. If so, sometimes that works, but most often that's not the case. And we're not able to successfully assign deacons to those teenagers. I think it's fair to say that our deacon ministry is primarily limited to adult church members. We kind of get out of our area of expertise if we try to move beyond that. We let our youth pastor and his leadership team minister to our teenagers.
Well, how do you assign deacons to singles?
Well, we acknowledge right up front that there's no easy answer. There's no cookie-cutter answer to singles either. Singles are also widely diversified. They range everything from college and career, who've never been married, who many of them are right out of high school, all the way up on the upper end to senior adult widows and widowers, and everything in between. And some of those groups can be really needy. So what we've done in the past is we normally ask deacons to volunteer this ministry. We've been blessed by deacons who have kind of sensed a calling to doing deacon ministry. I'll tell you something we're very cognizant of, and that is that participation from the deacon's wife is especially important with this group. Truthfully, it's one of those areas where the best case scenario is if the deacon is also the teacher for that group. Again, the natural connection is already there. The trust level is already there. But that, can't always be the case, can't always happen. So what we try to do is make up for that as best we can. It's helpful for the deacon to work closely with the singles teacher and to make frequent appearances in singles classes on Sunday mornings and at singles fellowships and retreats and parties, and do everything he can to build some level, trust level, and some connection level with the singles, and express this calling in his life.
Pastor, we had a comment from someone who said it's impossible for me to get off work during the workday to visit church members in the hospital. And their question is, how would I be effective in a New Testament deacon ministry?
And I'm sure that's in response to the comment I made in the previous session on so many of our deacons taking off work and getting to the hospitals. And I should have made note of it then. I'll make note of it now. Again, all deacons are in different situations. Some deacons have careers and jobs that lend themselves well to being able to take off during the day and make these visits. And that's wonderful, but in reality, that's probably the exception rather than the rule. Most deacons probably are not in a situation where they can take off during the day. I certainly can sympathize with that because there are times when I am in a situation where I can't immediately respond to a need for a member that's gone to the hospital. The rescue stations where you can't respond to members who are in the hospital. So it's nothing unusual for a deacon to be in that situation. I encourage the deacons to do what I do, to take a moment and simply call that member and talk to them on the phone. This means everything to a person in crisis. When they receive a phone call from a deacon who's expressing concern, asking about their situation, perhaps take time on the phone to pray with them, it just means everything in the world. And then later, when they get off work, as soon as they get an opportunity, the deacon can go by and visit with that church member then at the hospital.
In the previous sessions, you talked about meeting the physical and financial needs of your members. Can you explain a little bit more exactly how you might do that?
We've worked hard on this. We've really given a lot of attention and thought to this. We are able to minister to the physical and financial needs of our congregation through an array of different avenues that we've worked hard to establish. Normally with older folks, if they're independent, independent in that they're able to live by themselves, sometimes our deacons will carry independent church members to important appointments in their life, like medical appointments, or sometimes our senior adult ladies, to them, one of the most important things in their life is hair appointments and those kinds of things. So sometimes our deacons will carry church members to important appointments in their life. Sometimes church members have repair work that needs to be done in their homes, and they're not physically able to do that. So our deacons will either take care of those repair needs themselves if they're gifted in that sort of thing. More often, the case is the deacon will organize others to go out and take care of those repair needs in people's homes. Another ministry that we have, they'll donate their used appliances. They're still good, but they're used appliances. They'll donate those to the church. Then if we have a church member who has appliances go out, they'll contact their deacon. Their deacon will contact the church office. And if we have those appliances, then the deacon will come by and carry those used appliances out to the church member. And that's a lifesaver in many of those instances. We have a food pantry that I've already talked about at great length. And if there's a financial need in the home, one of the greatest things we can do, carry bags of food from our food pantry. The deacon will carry bags of food from the food pantry out to these families, and they can use their limited financial resources for other issues in life rather than having to purchase food. And then, too, we also have a line item in our budget that is designated for assisting members financially. We have a number of church members who have come to us and made themselves available to help other church members in financial needs. So if a deacon discovers one of his church members is having a financial need, he'll contact the church office, the staff, and we will rely either upon this line item in our budget, or we will contact some of these other church members who have made themselves available, and we'll cut a check. And the deacon will carry these financial funds out to the members who are in need and give it to them. Our deacons really do everything possible to minister to the physical and financial needs of the members assigned to them.
You know, regarding the deacon commitment that we talked about in the last session, that the deacons sign, how often do you have deacons who can't live up to that commitment, and how do you handle that?
Well, this was a big fear in the beginning when we first started doing this. But you know what? It doesn't happen frequently. There was a lot of hesitation when the men first began signing these commitments for this very reason. It's been much less frequent than any of us anticipated. But from time to time, it does happen. From time to time, a man's life situation will change so that he can no longer live up to that commitment. Now, I will say this. I don't think we've ever had to approach one of our deacons and talk to him regarding underperformance. That just has not been the case. But there have been occasions when their situations in life have changed, and sometimes a man will approach the deacon chairman and just indicate that he's going to need to go inactive for a season of time. And that can be because his career has changed and he has less time available to do deacon ministry. It could be because his children have reached a point in their lives where much more of his time is demanded for school activities, and that's certainly understandable. He may have illness in his home. There's a whole array of different causes that would require a man to give less attention to the deacon ministry and more time to his personal situation. And when that happens, that's never a cause for shame. It doesn't make a man a second-class deacon or a second-class Christian, and we don't treat it as such. We simply express our gratitude to him for his time of service and tell him if his life situation changes to make himself available for the next deacon election. And if he's elected, we'll be glad to put him back into service in our deacon ministry.
You know, regarding that, you've said that you and the deacons do church discipline secretly and kind of behind the scenes. One of the questions we have says, doesn't Matthew 18:17 say to take church discipline matters before the church?
Well, no, it doesn't say that. Matthew 18, verses 15 through 17, really doesn't address church discipline. That addresses the situation where one Christian has done something to offend another Christian. And Jesus is giving instruction there on how to get that resolved, that hurt, that offense between two Christians. So that really addresses when one church member has offended another church member. That really doesn't speak to when a church member does something to offend the congregation. It certainly is not addressed to the congregation at large or to the pastor. A better passage is Titus chapter 3, verse 10. Titus was one of Paul's proteges. He was the young pastor assigned to give leadership to the church on the island of Crete. And Paul wrote the letter we know as Titus to Pastor Titus. It wasn't primarily addressed to Christians at large. It wasn't primarily addressed to the congregation. Like 1st and 2nd Timothy, it is a pastoral letter, and it's written to Pastor Titus. And Paul's instruction to Pastor Titus in Titus chapter 3, verse 10 is warn a divisive person once, warn him twice, then have nothing to do with him. Now, as a congregation, our understanding is, or our view, our position is, that if we have a church member who is consistently being disobedient, living in sin, doing things that are contrary to Scripture, teachings of Scripture, offensive to the Lord, offensive to church members, we view that as being divisive. So as a pastor, I'll go to either my chairman of deacons or my deacon officers. On rare occasions, I've included all the deacons. But behind the scenes, we'll go to this person and warn them once that they need to stop this behavior, and we'll warn them a second time. But after that, we'll go to them not with a bitter spirit, with as kind and redemptive spirit as we can. We go to them and say, this is the situation. Because of the choices that you've made, we're going to take your name off of our membership roll, and we want to ask you to no longer attend our church until such time as you have stopped this behavior and have repented. Taking care of these issues quietly and discreetly helps maintain a spirit of peace and unity in the congregation that we couldn't have if we brought every issue before the church congregation.
Pastor, the last question is real simple. We just simply want to know, how would you suggest that we inform our congregation that we're going to begin a New Testament deacon ministry?
Well, my conviction is that the pastor and the deacons need to get together and discuss this and come to an agreement among themselves. The New Testament ministry team, the pastor and the deacons, need to be a team and start being a team. And this is where it begins. They get together, they discuss this, and they agree this is something they want to do and need to do. Then, as I've indicated in session 2, the next thing that needs to be done is the bylaws need to be modified to reflect New Testament deacon ministry and what deacons are going to do in the church. This kind of instills in the church a new DNA. But again, the pastors and the deacons need to kind of get together and kind of understand how that's going to be worded and how that's going to be included in the bylaws. Then the pastor might give thought to preaching a sermon on the role of the pastor and the role of deacons in a New Testament church, and kind of get that before the congregation as a part of that sermon, indicate to them that the ordained men of the church, the pastor and the deacons, are going to begin a new ministry in the congregation. I think at some point, and maybe this is where it needs to be, at a regular church business meeting, the congregation needs to ratify an official amendment, perhaps from the deacons, that amends the bylaws to include this in the bylaws, so that the whole congregation has now ratified this and has expressed their support in this ministry and is now part of the DNA of the church. And then after that, it's time for the deacons to divide the congregation, the families of the congregation, up among the deacons and begin doing the work. And I know God will bless them. He's blessed us, and He'll bless them. In closing, just let me say again, and this is where I began in session 1, that in no way are we suggesting that we have discovered the one and only way of doing New Testament deacon ministry. What we are saying is that we have intentionally set aside all of the patterns that tradition has dictated, and we have consciously returned to the New Testament, and we have tried our best to structure our New Testament ministry based upon what we find there in the New Testament. And our testimony to you, and the testimony from our congregation, is that our men are fulfilled. Our deacons are fulfilled in their ministry. They have a sense of contribution. They have a sense of meaningfulness. I consider them my associate ministers, and they consider themselves associate ministers. And more importantly, the congregation considers them as their associate ministers, and everyone in our congregation is having their needs met to the extent that they will allow those needs to be met. Other churches now have been exposed to what we're doing here. They have gone through this presentation, and the word that we're receiving is that as they are adopting this approach to deacon ministry, the Lord is blessing them as He has blessed us, and we're so very grateful for that. Even if you and your congregation, you and your deacons don't do exactly as we're doing, and we're not even suggesting that, I do think there's great value in this discussion. I think there's great value in pastors and deacons just sitting down and talking about these things and getting into Scripture and discussing the importance of trying our best to follow the pattern established in the New Testament. I believe God will honor just the discussion of New Testament deacon ministry. I know this. It has become the hallmark. It has become the foundation of our congregation. And I'm so grateful for our deacons and their great service. I know God's going to bless you as you continue to pursue this great ministry.